Okay, so my name is Morgan, and I'm the outreach and assistant library. I'm sorry, the outreach and assistant librarian at Central Carolina Community College, and we've got a great host of panelists today. I am going to tell you that we're going to display the question on the screen, and then we will answer those questions. And at the end, we'll take any questions if we have time, and if there are any links that I will share them in the chat, but I'll also share them in the email after we kind of wrap everything up. Okay, so the panelists today, I'm going to let them introduce themselves just to kind of give an introduction to who they are and what they enjoy about North Carolina or their jobs, and then we will get started. Michael, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Michael Brantley. I teach English and creative writing at Barton College. I'm the Elizabeth Jordan Chair of Southern Literature, and I've written 5 books of nonfiction, and they're all about North Carolina.
And Grace?
Hi, I'm Grace May. I work at the Forsyth County Public Library in Winston-Salem. I'm a special collections librarian, and I help people do genealogy research for their family history, or I help them do local history research. And so I kind of specialize in anything North Carolina or family history related.
Thank you. And Melanie?
I'm Melanie Buckingham. I work at the Kathleen Clay Library in Greensboro. It's an environmentally focused public library, and I plan nature and environmental programs.
I love that. And then Christy is working on getting in right now. She has shared a lot of great resources. And so as she's able to join, then we will give her a moment to introduce herself then. Okay, so first question, and this is a great opportunity, I think, for, I'd love to hear from Grace and Michael about what makes North Carolina's history unique or significant among the places in the South or even the United States. Grace, do you want to kick us off a little bit about kind of your expertise?
Sure. So in the North Carolina collection, we used to have a historian. He's since passed away, and he had a saying, all roads lead back to Winston-Salem. And I don't know if that's true or not, but one such thing to support his theory is we have a famous building in town called the Reynolds Building. It's about 300 feet tall. At the time it was built in 1929, it was the tallest building in the state. And it was built by Shreve, Lamb, and Harmon, the architects, and they would go on 2 years later to build the Empire State Building. And it is kind of a loose, or well, sort of known thing that the Reynolds Building in Winston-Salem is the prototype for the Empire State Building, what would go on to be the Empire State Building. And there's always been kind of a legend that the Empire State Building would send the Reynolds Building in Winston-Salem a Happy Father's Day card every year. I went to go see if that was true or not. It's not exactly true, but in 1979, when it celebrated its 50th anniversary of being built, the Empire State Building did send a card that said, "Happy birthday, Dad." And they have it framed in the lobby of the Reynolds Building.
Oh.
So that's a really cool little fact about Winston-Salem, or the South, North Carolina, that like connects us all the way to, the Big Apple. They would go on to build other buildings in New York City as well, but they stopped and built one in Winston-Salem for the Reynolds Company, which is a tobacco company. And it's no longer the tallest in the state anymore. It was surpassed quite a few times over, even in Winston-Salem. I think it's maybe in like the top 75 tallest buildings in the state, but it's no longer the tallest anymore. And it has that connection outside of us, but then it also is deeply connected to Winston-Salem and tobacco, which I'll talk about a little later. But the Reynolds Company was a huge national company that was just out of Winston-Salem.
Thank you, Grace. If we could pause just 1 second. Christy, welcome. I just wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself and kind of give your expertise, and then we'll continue on with this question. Oh, it looks like you might be muted there.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yay, we can hear you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I apologize for being tardy. I had technical difficulties. I use Zoom all the time and it wouldn't let me in on my work computer. So I'm using my Apple iPad. So I'm not sure what this is going to look like. But if you guys can't hear me or if something looks weird, you just let me know. My name is Christy Brantley. I'm the local government coordinator and certified local government coordinator for the State Historic Preservation Office in North Carolina. And I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. So currently we're kind of answering this first question here, what makes North Carolina unique? And I think you or Michael could add to your knowledge, add with your knowledge the answer to this question.
Yeah, I'll be happy to go ahead. I mean, that's an open-ended question and I could talk about that for hours. A lot of these questions we all could. So I was just kind of looking through just to decide what kind of cool stories I thought would be interesting to the audience. Of course, there's the dates on the flags, so make sure that they take note of those dates on the flags, and one of us can elaborate later if they'd like for us to. But one of the interesting stories, in 1865, North Carolina's copy of the Bill of Rights was stolen. And through the years, people tried to sell it back to North Carolina, but they didn't feel that they should pay for something that was already theirs. So in 2003, there was a sting operation involving the FBI and the Attorney General's office. And someone was trying to sell North Carolina's copy of the Bill of Rights, and they seized it during that sale. So we received our Bill of Rights back in 2003 after being gone 1865. I think, what's that, 140, almost 140 years?
That is pretty incredible.
Pretty cool story.
That is crazy. So I think I got the link for that. If anybody's interested in that story, there's the link in there.
Yep, cool.
And
thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Michael, is there anything that you want to add about this question?
Yeah, I think one thing that comes to mind for me is I think people moved to North Carolina or came here to be left alone or to get away from other people, it seems like. And the things I would point to for evidence, Christy mentioned the dates, Halifax resolves, let's get away from the English. We were one of the last states to secede. You could argue that it was the last state. I mean, there's a few technicalities in there to maybe say it's the next to last. But then the other thing, the state was really slow to build infrastructure and to connect the cities. So, there's this joke, and I'll mention it later, about the Rip Van Winkle state. Was one of the references, because we were, everybody's for progress except for us. We were kind of like, no, we don't want any of that progress stuff. Y'all can have that. And then, this ornery thing, I would tell a story about my address, even though I live out in the country, my address is Spring Hope. And to me, this story kind of illustrates North Carolina. Back in the late 1800s, the railroad was trying to come through that area. And there was a little town called Spring Hope, and there was a guy who wouldn't sell his land to the railroad, and so the whole town just moved about 5 miles away. So the whole town just picked up and moved because one person was being hard to get along with. So I've written a little something about the town that that packed up and moved one day, and so now there's Spring Hope and there's Old Spring Hope. So it's just kind of fun.
That.
I mean, to me, there's a lot of stories like that in North Carolina. That's just one that comes to mind, I think.
Thank you for sharing that. And Melanie, I'd actually like you to kick this off, and then Grace, you can add what you're thinking about. How has the history of agriculture shaped North Carolina and shaped the North Carolina we see today? Oh, Melanie, hey, real quick, you're on mute. So if you could, just have to unclick it there and then.
I was saying I actually picked more of the environmental stuff than the agriculture. For me, I would just say that the cooperative extension offices are my connection to agriculture here in North Carolina A&T, and then our Guilford County Cooperative Extension Office. But I think our agriculture is really seeing a transition. We're seeing more people, even I'm in the Master Gardener program, or I've completed it, but we're seeing a lot of people that are doing small farms. Debbie Ruse is great for small farm resources. I think another trend too is we have had classes here at the library on microgreens. We had about 100 people come. That was really popular. So I think small gardens and people doing entrepreneur programs in agriculture is really growing in our state.
I totally agree. And I love that you mentioned the ag extensions. I've just put a link in the chat so that everybody can connect to their local ag extension, because it's definitely a modern resource for right now that everybody can use. So thank you for mentioning that. Grace, what are your thoughts about this question?
Hi, I'm so glad you kind of covered the recent, because since we do a lot of historical stuff in the room, I have the old stuff. So in Winston-Salem, tobacco was huge, when they brought the railroad through Salem, and then eventually Winston, which is a whole other story because Winston and Salem were right next to each other, but refused to be one city for like 60 years. So I guess kind of like Michael was saying. But once they did that, a very well-known guy in our community named Richard Joshua Reynolds, who people called RJ, came and started a tobacco company here in the 1870s. And after that, there were so many tobacco businesses that popped up in town. But Reynolds Tobacco Company would see sales even in the billions. When Reynolds was still alive, RJ died in 1918. So for 1918, those were big numbers. And it would continue to grow exponentially from about the 1920s until the 1980s when Philip Morris took over. They were the largest tobacco company in the world.
Oh, wow.
And they were definitely a national, producer of tobacco products. One of their products famously was Camel cigarettes. And today they still call us the Camel City. It's actually, they had a mascot for a while, Joe Camel. He was like a very debonair camel who smoked and skied and wore tuxedos and, was very cool. I think he was labeled like smooth character, for smooth tobacco or whatever. But then in the late 90s, when they had a lot of consumer complaints that it was advertising to children, they took away Joe Camel. And that was around the time too that they had the big tobacco lawsuits against the four big national tobacco companies. And so while RJ Reynolds company is not as big as it once was, there were a lot of layoffs. They still do provide a lot of jobs and they still sell cigarettes nationally. So it's been a huge, important part of North Carolina's business.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that shows a clear picture of sort of the way that RJ Reynolds has really influenced kind of what we see around us, especially in Winston-Salem. Michael, Christy, did you want to add anything about this particular question?
You can go first if you want, Christy.
I think you have more experience with the agricultural piece of North Carolina. I'm gonna talk to you.
All right. Well, so Barton College, if you're not familiar, is in Wilson. Excuse me. And so Wilson at one time was the biggest tobacco market in the entire world. And my parents raised tobacco when I was young. Matter of fact, the greatest day, I always say the greatest day of my childhood was the day they told us all they weren't going to do tobacco anymore. Because the next year coming up for me would have been the really hard working year. So everybody was crying and I was jumping up and down. But you can still see that that influence in Wilson, even though the tobacco market is not what it was. I can remember coming to town when we would sail, and Wilson was like a huge city. It was just nowhere to park. All the restaurants were full. Just to see that impact and how that's just changed in my lifetime. Some of the things that were mentioned a minute ago about the lawsuits and and all the changes. And students are shocked now when I tell them, this was the center of the this state, and Wilson and Rocky Mount and Winston-Salem and Durham was the capital of the world for tobacco. And then I think I think the generation now doesn't even think about that as a thing. And it's just interesting to see how fast that's changed. But some of that money is still around. I mean, a lot of it built colleges all across the state, and particularly here. Some of I remember a history professor telling us in a class here. I don't remember if Christy was in that class or not, but he said Wilson had more millionaires per capita than any other city in the United States. Nobody ever fact checked him. We didn't have Google in the early 90s, but it seemed reasonable. So the effects I think are still there, but it's just amazing how that was king, and now it's maybe not even an afterthought for a lot of people. Anybody under 45, say.
I think you're absolutely right. Thank you for sharing that perspective and that sort of background story of how you've seen that shift over time.
I think something I was going to add is we have a Green Reads book club, and we have talked about agriculture in our Green Reads book club. And one of the issues is families. I think it's called heirs property, but basically families being really divided about what to do with farmland. And then some of these home places are being lost now that used to be agricultural, property. So I think the transition of agricultural lands is a big issue in North Carolina, and maintaining some of those agricultural lands.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense too. I had not considered there's a book that I have read a little bit of that talks about money as an emotional topic because of the ways that families interact around it. I had not thought about land as also being an emotional topic just because of ways relationships and how people act around it or with it. So thank you. That's great. So we kind of got the questions mixed a little bit. So this one's going to be more about culture. So what makes North Carolina's culture unique or significant among the places in the South or even the United States? And so for folks that don't know, this is the image of the Moravian star on the picture here. So if you you've seen it, but you don't know where it comes from, Grace can give us a little bit of insight about what that means.
Yeah, so the Moravian star comes from the Moravian people, little known Protestant Christian religion that's two main hubs in the United States are here in Winston-Salem, and then one up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. The star comes from when they were still in Germany. A boys' math class had a project to do that, and they made that star, and it became a symbol for all Moravians. And then now, you see it across the state a lot, but people may not always know who Moravians are. And they are Christian. They're just another sect of Protestant. They were originally from what we now call the Czech Republic, and then they fled to Saxony in Germany and stayed on the lands of Count Zinzendorf, then eventually moving to Pennsylvania, and then a group broke off from there to come down to North Carolina and buy what they called the Wachovia Tract, which was the land that Count Zinzendorf lived on, so they kind of named it after him, in 1753. Now, Forsyth County was founded in 1849, so the Moravian settlement predates the county by almost 100 years. And one of the ways I can tell you that they're different than other Protestant religions is that they thought that boys and girls should be educated equally. We're home to Salem College here, which is the oldest educational institution for girls and women in the United States, and it's actually older than the United States because it started in the 1772. It was originally a school for girls who lived in Salem, but there was so much interest that it became a boarding school, and then it eventually turned into an academy and a college that we now know today. So it's very significant for our community. I feel like I grew up with a lot of that, hearing a lot of those values. My grandfather was a Moravian minister, and he often would talk about how he sent his wife to college before he went to college. So I grew up with kind of that instilled in me. And then if you've never been to Old Salem, it's very cool. They were kind of old school. Like I said, they didn't want to be friendly with Winston for a long time. It wasn't until 1913 that we became one city. But you can still go there and see some of the original buildings. There are people in period costumes who tell you about them. You can go to the bakery and get baked goods, which we're really well known for our food, and I'll talk about that a little later. But you can go to the gun shop, the doctor's house, and learn about how life was back then. And one of the coolest things is they have a graveyard called God's Acre. And back in the day, it's a bit different now, but they believed everyone was equal. And so everyone just had a single slab stone with like their name and their dates, and that was it. Nobody got anything fancy or anything like that because everyone was supposed to be equal even in death. And that was even true for some of the enslaved people until we got further towards the Civil War, and then that changed eventually. But so, I mean, it's a huge part of culture because we're one of the only places in the United States that you can go and learn about Moravian people. There's tons of Moravian churches here. So hopefully I've taught someone about it today, because I know when I went to East Carolina for college and I told people I was Moravian, they were like, "What is that?"
Yeah,
So happy to spread the word about Moravian people.
thank you. Michael, Christy, did you want to add anything about this or anything that stood out to you as unique among the culture?
And so you've got to say the war of barbecue. If somebody's going to have to mention barbecue. So depending on where you are, depends on what barbecue tastes like, looks like, means to you. So I won't elaborate too much. Most people know Western is a tomato-based sauce and Eastern is a vinegar. I believe there's a speaker at Barton tonight that is going to have a little bit about that. The other thing that I wanted to mention real quick is all the different dialects. And there's a great program at NC State, a linguistic program, and a gentleman by the name of Walt Wolfram has headed that up. He's actually written a great book called Talking Tar Heel or Talk Like a Tar Heel, and all the different dialects across North Carolina. And I think there's like 200 of them. There's a little QR code in the book that you can go to and listen to the different dialects. If you go to the fair this week, if you go to the Carr Scott building, they have a little table there and they have buttons, and these buttons have sayings on them. So for example, if I told you I wanted you to put something in the boot of my car, would you know where I was talking about? So depending on where you are from in North Carolina, absolutely, but some of you refer to it as a trunk. If someone calls you that is a native of Harker's Island, Atlantic, down east, you hear that old English accent. I work with people all across the state, and a gentleman, when I started my job, it was the beginning of COVID. So I was talking with everybody on the phone or virtually, and I had a telephone call from a gentleman one day, and I knew exactly what region of the state he was from. He turned out to be from Cleveland County on the other end of the state. So our dialects are very different, and they're a very big part of our culture. And so if you've never really thought about that, I see, Morgan, you put some links in there. I just encourage you to check it out, and how interesting it is to see the diversity across North Carolina.
Thank you. Yeah, you mentioned Talking Tar Heel, and we have that book here at Harnett campus. So if you want that book or anybody wants to check it out, we've got it. You just let me know and we will.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll be fixing to go get it for you.
You can get buttons at the state fair that say that.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll have to check that out. Michael, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I might add on to what maybe build off of what Christy was saying. You know, we've got these three. Every state doesn't have these like three distinct regions. I feel like where you got the coastal, the Piedmont, and the mountains, and they don't sound that much alike. I mean, when you were saying earlier, when I talk to somebody on the phone from somewhere else, they'll immediately peg me as, usually they'll say Eastern North Carolina or North Carolina. I'm not so crazy about it when they say Carolina accent, right? Because I think that's a whole nother argument to make. But we got those three distinct dialects and traditions, and sonkers and cobblers, and I love that use of language, and I think that's unique for us. Not to mention the water versus the mountains all in one place. But I think that I'm going to say that Scots, Irish, German, English independent streak has been one thing that really, I mean, those are pretty, I used the word ornery earlier. I think you could, I mean, I've got all four of those, so I feel like I'm talking about my own folks here. But, we've got that thing where, we just don't go, the state's culture has just always been to not necessarily go along.
Mhm.
Sometimes that was good and sometimes that was bad. But it was kind of like, well, we don't care, we're going to do what we think, sort of thing. And I think that's impacted a lot of areas. We don't always talk about it that way, maybe.
Mhm.
Uh,
That's a great point. I had not considered, in fact, prior to about a month ago, I'd never even heard of the idea of a Rip Van Winkle state. So when you mentioned that just now, I was like, oh yeah, I just learned about that about a month ago.
Yeah, I mean, there was a whole group of legislators that did not want any kind of progress because they want things to change. They like
Mhm.
things that they were, didn't want to change anything, disrupt, just keep it like it is. And it's just hard. I mean, it's kind of hard to think you were against railroads and against education. It just seems, like I said, not all of that orneriness is necessarily good. Some of it I think maybe was. Um,
Mhm.
Interesting to think that I don't know, you look back now and it's how, how do you get to that way of thinking sometimes, I guess.
That's a great point too.
Morgan, I was going to add something about culture. Grace made me remember it, but
Yeah.
in Greensboro, we have a Quaker community, and our library kind of backs up to Guilford College. And that has a rich history in the Greensboro area. And if folks come to Greensboro, they may want to check out the Underground Railroad tree, which is close to Kathleen Clay Library and Guilford College. And it's a tree that's been here since the Underground Railroad times, and it's a witness tree. And they've created an interpretive walk to it. So it's really worth seeing if you come in our area. And it's a massive tree. So really a unique thing to see in Greensboro when you come.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the Guilford College has the Quaker archives.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a significant feature of Greensboro and Guilford County.
Mhm.
Okay, so Melanie, this is your time to shine when it comes to what are some environmental educational resources available in North Carolina that are valuable to students and staff, maybe, or ones that they might be interested in visiting.
Okay. If you turn to the next slide, if you're not familiar with the North Carolina Office of Environmental Education, it's through the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. It's great resource for teachers, for students, for librarians. The website has information about an environmental education certification. And by doing the certification, you're traveling all over the state and oftentimes going behind the scenes at aquariums and the zoo. And you get to attend some professional development workshops, get lots of curriculum materials, and you really learn the state when you go to the state forests, the state parks, and all those places. So the Office of Environmental Education kind of coordinates that curriculum program. They also offer grants, job information, just a lot of great resources. And then they have a lunchtime discovery Zoom program every Wednesday. So really good resources.
That's awesome. Thank you.
And then if you just change to the next screen, if you're not familiar, they also have Discover Your Ecological Address. So if you're trying to learn about natural history in North Carolina, this is kind of a guide they have on their website. Covers a lot of topic areas: topography, air, climate, soil. And it's also a great way to do a deep dive into learning about your own natural history in your area. So great resource. Then if you go to the next slide.
Okay. All right, there we go.
These are not everybody knows about these, but these are environmental education centers in North Carolina. And they are places that adults and children, teachers, general public can become environmentally literate. So they can learn about North Carolina's natural resources from the experts, from science center staff, zoo and aquarium staff, foresters, and there's over 200 environmental centers across the state. So if you turn to the next slide, they have an alphabetized listing of all these places. They used to have a booklet about it, and I would keep it in my car. And when I traveled around the state, I would try to, kind of see what EE center was in the county I was in. And it's just a wealth of resources when you go to see these. If you go to the next slide, they also have a map, an interactive map of environmental education centers through the Office of Environmental Education, and you can click on your county and find out what's in your area, or if you're traveling, to find out what's in the area that you're visiting.
Oh, I love that. That has given me something new to do.
And then if you click one more time, I was just going to highlight a couple of them. So our library is considered an environmental education center. We are located in Greensboro. We're just a public library branch, but we have an environmental focus. We've been open 20 years, and we offer over 100 environmental programs a year at our location. We're in a 98-acre park with walking trails, meadows, screened-in porch, and fireplace. So it looks like a retreat center when you come. And then the middle picture's a mural that's been done by Thomas Berry. In honor of Thomas Berry, done by Chip Holton, who's a local artist, and he does murals. Thomas Berry was from Greensboro. He was a philosopher, a monk, a scholar. And when he was alive, he would bring guests from India and China and Japan and show them the mural. And his writings are in Harvard's library. So he's kind of like I would say like a local hero in a way.
That's awesome.
Yep. And then the other picture is just our screened-in porch being used for a children's program. And then I'll highlight another environmental education center. If you're not familiar with this location, Cape Fear Museum of History and Science, it's a great blend of the two, and it's in Wilmington. I wanted to share some of the resources that were in there. There's also a Michael Jordan Discovery Gallery, because Michael Jordan was from Wilmington. And then they also have a new space place in there. But if you're looking for the combination of history and science, it's a great destination point. And then if you go to the next slide, just wanted to highlight the Outer Banks Center for Wildlife Education. They are really well known for their outdoor programming, like birding, crabbing, fishing, guided beach walks. But they also have a lot of information about the cultural heritage of the Outer Banks. So it's also a great blend of history and natural history and culture. So a wonderful place to visit. So I just wanted to highlight some of these environmental education centers across the state, because they're just a real gem, and sometimes people aren't aware that they exist, but great places to visit and learn about our state.
That is awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
Now I'm going to be like so distracted for the rest of the afternoon to look through all of these wonderful, great education centers. This is great.
Great.
So kind of switching gears a little bit, what is your favorite regional dish? So this is less academic and just more of a question of what you just really love about North Carolina food. Anybody can answer. You can go in order. It's whatever you feel you want to answer.
I can go first.
Okay.
So I'm going to talk more about Moravian people. Being a Moravian minister's granddaughter, it's just in my blood, I guess. We have a regional dish called Moravian chicken pie. That is probably my favorite dish. I think when I was at ECU, down east, they have something called chicken pastry that sounded really similar. But it's the lesser known of the Moravian foods. People come to get, we have this like delicious sugar cake, love feast buns that are kind of like Hawaiian rolls, ginger cookies, but Moravian chicken pie is the lesser of them, but it's my favorite, and it's very simple. It's just chicken, gravy, and pie crust. Don't add vegetables, then you have a pot pie, and it's totally different. Vegetables can go on the side. So, but it's just like a really nice comfort food, I guess.
Yeah.
And oftentimes churches in Winston-Salem at Christmas would make them and then sell them as part of a fundraising thing. You can still buy them frozen in little country stores and stuff around the county. So it's one of my favorite dishes.
That's awesome. Thank you. Michael, do you have a favorite?
Yeah, you know where I'm going, but I will say, I think I had that chicken pie on a visit to Salem, and it was amazing. It's real simple, but man, it was so good. I mean, you maybe remember that, and that's probably been 12, 13 years ago, how good that was. But yeah, I would be a traitor if I didn't mention Eastern North Carolina barbecue, I feel like. Which is the best barbecue, and we love to start fights, over that. I think Christy mentioned that earlier. But where we live, so Wilson is kind of like in this, the triangle capital of Eastern. You got Greenville and Wilson, and I don't know what completes that. Maybe I guess Goldsboro maybe completes. It'd be a weird looking triangle, I guess. But really good places where it's just chopped pork with vinegar and pepper. That's kind of the way we do it, and it's funny because students that come in that aren't from around here, they think it sounds so odd. And then they'll go to Parker's or Marty's or somewhere like that here in town. And they're like, oh, I get it. It's like a revelation to them. That didn't sound good, but it turned out being good. I think the thing about that, though, is those places are going away. These little places, there was one in Farmville that was really well known, and the younger generation didn't want to keep it going, and you're starting to see more of those close. So I don't want to say it's vanishing, but it's not as where it was in every town, it's not. Wilson's big for it. Greenville's maybe the epicenter, and then other place. Goldsboro's got an old famous place, and but I think once you start getting out. When you start getting out of east heading towards Raleigh, you really start vanishing. You still get some smokehouses, which is similar, but not exactly the same. And so it is one of those things where it's I don't know if you say it's more regional, but it's getting to be not as common. I was talking to somebody the other day about pig pickings, and I don't know if people know what that is, where you cook a whole hog and people come over, here traditionally it was in a tobacco season was when people would do it, sort of celebrate, reward everybody that had worked in it. And when I was growing up, it didn't seem like an unusual thing. Almost everybody was a farmer, almost everybody did it. And now I couldn't tell you the last time I went to a place where somebody had cooked a whole hog as a family or for the community or for friends. And so I do think that's one of those things that's, we were talking about earlier, you take for granted that it's always going to be a thing, and maybe it's not so much anymore.
Absolutely. Christy, did you have a?
Yeah, I was just going to add on to what Mike said. Nashville has good barbecue on up into Roanoke Rapids, out towards Kenly area. So that there's still a little bit of that around, but it is disappearing. There used to be a great place in Lewisburg that's no longer there. And I was going to mention my favorite. My grandmother used to make shrimp scampi for me, and of course oysters and seafood, and that her shrimp scampi has not been matched anywhere. and I want to toss one back to Mike that I'm surprised he didn't mention, and that was his mama's sweet potato pie. Very unusually done. I'll let you tell Mike.
Yeah, I mean, if it's okay to talk about that.
Yeah.
But I think when most people think about sweet potato pie, they think of like a custard uh type pie, like a pumpkin pie except with sweet potatoes. I think that's what people think of. But my grandmother made one. It was two crusts, a bottom and a top. But the inside of it was real simple. It was just sweet potatoes, and the water that the sweet potatoes were boiled in, and then sugar, and sometimes they'd use allspice. It's kind of been replaced by cinnamon, and sometimes lemon, and that was pretty much it. And I didn't know it was an uncommon thing until I got older, and it seems like nobody makes it that way. And my conclusion is that was a depression dish. That's she had a sweet tooth, and that's what she had. She had some flour and she had some sweet potatoes. And I even actually contacted Southern Foodways Alliance, and they don't have anything that really tracks with it. It's kind of an unusual sort of dish that you only run into variations of it in sort of this part of the state so far. I hadn't been able to find anybody from another part of North Carolina that makes it that way.
That is unusual.
Oh, butter. I think I left out butter.
Yeah, but I mean, still, that's very unique.
And it's great. And we don't have it very often. Usually Thanksgiving, my sister or I will make one, and that's about it.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that.
Morgan, I was going to mention that there are a lot of great books to check out about North Carolina food. Carolina Table is a really good one. It's by North Carolina food writers. It was our featured One City, One Book in Greensboro, and it's a great opportunity to learn about, regional food by regional writers.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because we have several copies actually in the North Carolina Community College system. So I've linked that. So if people want that book, you just let me know and I will request it and get it sent over to whatever location you are at. All right, let's see.
That was going to add.
Oh, yes.
One other thing about food, I think a lot of us have local businesses, food companies that have started in our areas.
Mhm.
In Greensboro, we have Biscuitville, so that's locally owned and started in Greensboro and is now in Virginia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. But that's a big favorite in our area for regional food.
That is awesome. I did not know that.
Mhm.
That's so great. I can't wait to share that fact with anybody that will stand still long enough to listen. I'd put it. What'd you say, Grace?
I was gonna say now I have to say Krispy Kreme is from Winston-Salem. So thank you
You're
for
so
reminding
right.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Krispy Kreme is really great. And it's so funny. I think the other day I was driving in the car and that was a question on the radio where it had started and almost nobody got it right until it was like in the afternoon, someone came on and got it right. So I was really surprised by that. So thank you for sharing that. So kind of a final question. We're getting closer towards the end of this session, but I wanted to give everybody a chance on the panel to answer how we as individuals and communities can help North Carolina flourish and become more and more a state that continues to blossom. So Melanie, do you want to go first?
I would just say, as our role as librarians, we really impact a lot of people in our communities, whether it's through our programming, our collections, or our face-to-face interactions with people, our partnerships with our community, the library partners with, universities, nonprofits, businesses. So I think librarians have a big role in the future of North Carolina. And I think it is about building community and bringing people together. And also creating places where people can meet. There's that topic of the loneliness factor in our country. And I think libraries are a great place to bring people together and also people that have a lot of differences to come together. So
yeah,
role of libraries.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Grace? What would you say for the answer to this question?
Well, I guess I'm gonna piggyback off that a little bit. A lot of what I do at the public library, and I would like to share that a lot of public libraries across the state have North Carolina collections or local history or genealogy collections. And I'm very passionate about helping people find out about their family history. I think it helps you kind of see yourself in perspective of your family, but also your community.
Mhm.
And so I often hear from people, I wish I would have asked so-and-so this before they passed, or I wish my grandmother was still around for this information. And so I would just try to encourage people, even if you're not interested in doing the research, to talk to people in your family. They'll help you learn more about your community and maybe like where you fit in it. And maybe you'll feel a little bit more situated, like you can know yourself and your place better in your community, or see where you're going to go from there. And I just think it's really rewarding. Inevitably, learning about your family, you'll learn about the history of the state, and then it's just it's people find it really rewarding, and I like helping them a lot to do that. So yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you, Grace. Michael, what about you? How would you answer this question?
Yeah, well, I'd kind of piggyback a little bit on that. You know, one thing I always say is we need to make sure we protect the arts and humanities. Um, everybody talks about AI and all that stuff, but just to give you the librarian example, in the research I've done, there's not everything's on the internet. You know, people talk about not everything on the internet's true, but not everything's on the internet. And there's several things that I found and was able to write about because a librarian helped me with it. And that's, so I would say, that's an important thing. And when people start talking, it bothers me when people start talking about return on investment. You know, it's easy to figure that out for real estate and stocks and your bank account. But I don't know, how do you determine what the value is of enjoying a really good book or listening, going to see live music? How do you put a value on that? Or, just standing in front of one of the Monets or Pizarros in the art museum. I mean, that's worth a whole lot, but I don't know that you're putting dollars on that. I guess indirectly, maybe. And so I just don't want to see, and just like this thing we just did right now, I feel like I learned so much about Winston-Salem and really enjoy. And then I thought about chicken pie, right? I mean, what's that worth? I mean, you
Yeah.
can't put a dollar on that, but it's worth a whole lot. And
Mhm.
so I think that's one of the things I don't want to see get lost in the shuffle of how we reimagine things, that we cut out these important things like library and art and books and movies and all the things that it's hard to put a dollar value on them, but they sure are worth a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Christy, what about you? How would you answer this question?
So, well, just like everyone else has mentioned, and Grace, have an understanding of where we've come from. Know your history a little bit, the good and the bad. Talk to the older people in your life. Ask them if you're standing in a store, and I won't mention any by name, but a brand new store that's been constructed recently. Say, what was there before that was there, and if they tell you agriculture, well, what did they grow? Just talk to the people that are older in your life, and ask them questions about what things used to look like, and how much it has changed. And as Grace was talking about, it helps give yourself a sense of place and ownership, and it enriches your life to understand where you and your family have come from. I'm going to put a little plug in here. America's 250th. We're getting ready to celebrate our 250th anniversary, and there's a big word for it that I'm going to butcher, but I'm going to try to say it. Semi-sesquicentennial. I think that's right. Anyway, it's very big. That's probably wrong, and my colleagues are probably cringing right now. But anyway, there's an A250NC website where you can get involved. They're hoping every county will have a commission. Most of them do. There's still a couple of counties that don't, but there's lots of different things you can get involved in and learn some about how we became us, how we became the United States, how we became us. So anyway, I encourage everyone to check that out, and I'll just end with that. But yeah.
Thank you. I just want to say our panelists did a fantastic job, but they also provided me with tons of resources, and I have those resources kind of scattered throughout. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you all this information in an email that kind of connects you with everything. And if you have questions, you can always follow up. I'm going to also send out these slides, but I just want to say thank you to the panelists, and I just appreciate all of the information that you had to offer. And this was so great. I learned a lot. And for the attendees, we didn't maybe get to your question, but I'm going to now give you a form. You can let us know what you thought about the program, but you can also add questions, and then we can kind of work on sharing those questions after the program concludes. And if we can answer those, then we'll try to get you some answers based on whatever question that you have. So thank you so much for joining us. And if you feel like you enjoyed this kind of program, you can let us know, and then we'll see if we can do more North Carolina focused programs, because we would love to talk about North Carolina.